Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, July 11th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I am Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday in the afternoon, usually 1 o'clock, but this week we're at different times. I guess it's 1 o'clock if you're in the West. So, this is the West Coast people get to experience what the rest of us get to experience the rest of the time. But because Mike's been at camps and I've been running around, and so you are at the scrimmages today, Mike, right?
Yes. Yeah, the Leafs scrimmage. Actually, like I said, they invited 57 players, and the majority of them were free agents. And the free agents have been practicing and scrimmaging the last 4 days, and the prospects, the drafted players, have been just like going through drills. So all the free agents had 3 days of game action, relative game action, to sort of prepare, and today they beat the draft picks. There was some good performances, but the free agents are not supposed to beat the draft picks. The draft picks were drafted; they're supposed to be more talented.
right.
In general, they are, but you had a couple players who are trying to impress. One that some people would know is a kid named Jake Tatura, who is from the U.S. National Development Program. He's going to be playing at Boston College, and he scored a hat trick today. He's real small, 5'6", like 150 pounds. Okay. So he's along the lines of a Johnny Gaudreau and a Brian Giunta, who are both Boston College grads. And he's going to BC, and I think he's hoping that he can be like the next in the long line of smallish players who come out of BC and make something of themselves in the NHL. But, he's going to go back, and he'll probably be in the draft. He'll be in the draft next year. And, based on the limited amount of what I've seen of him, I think he'll get drafted because he's playing pretty well.
No, he's put together the hat trick today, like you said. And then before this, he's been really strong too, right? It's not.
Yeah, he played good yesterday too. So, yeah, but right now he's not signable because he's going to Boston College, and there are a couple of these other players who are going to college as well. But that's, again, like we mentioned yesterday, the Leafs are up against it in terms of contracts. So anybody that they're interested in, they have to sign to AHL contracts and not pro deals. That's why, like I said, I think there's going to be some sort of deal down the line, maybe sooner, maybe later. But there's a lot of talk right now.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So there is a lot of talk. We'll get into that as well, and we'll get into some of that soon. I wanted to first, before we get into the main story, which I want to talk about a little bit about Colorado and what I wrote about today and other stuff that's going on with that. We have a couple of breaking things that happened after we got off the air today. Of course, the Lightning, I did re-sign Tyler Johnson to a 7-year extension. Pretty good money, $5 million a year, right? Is that roughly?
Well, and I think as I texted to both you and Russ, again, the Tampa Bay Lightning benefit from the tax situation in Florida because more than likely on the open market, if it's any other team other than Tampa or Florida or the Dallas Stars, Johnson's probably getting closer to $6 million, but because there's no state tax in Florida, like Stamkos took 8.5, whereas he was going to get offered 10 or 11 from Toronto or Detroit or Buffalo, whoever. Johnson takes $5 million from Tampa, but it would have necessitated another team if he was a UFA to pay about $1 million more. So he gets to stay with a team that's good, the team that he's played with his entire career, and he gets $5 million, which is a little below market, but because he'll get most of it without the state tax. It's a benefit to him. So it's a good deal for both them and him.
I think this is about right amount of money for him, honestly, even with another team. Johnson, I like Tyler Johnson. He has moments when he looks really outstanding, where he looks like he's a world beater, but he also has disappearing trick moments too, where he has over the past couple of years. Last year, 45.66 games, so not like crazy here last year.
Right, and he's he's a smaller player, and he's been injured a couple times. But I mean, just like defensemen are getting overpaid, centers are getting overpaid. So I think that yes, it's a good amount, and that's the amount that it's beneficial for Tampa, but I think on the open market he would have gotten more, even though he may have not have deserved it because he's a center and there are not many centers out there.
Right. But I'll tell you, the people who play in Tampa love playing in Tampa. They do, and it's no wonder. I mean, it's a beautiful area. I mean, it's where I vacation twice a year to see my in-laws, and in that just south there, it is absolutely paradise-like. And I think it's much nicer, in my opinion, than Miami and the other coast. Just which I'm going to be going to in a couple weeks as well, just to do some business stuff down there. But I think I'm a huge fan, and honestly, Tyler Johnson just fits into his attitude, the way it all makes sense to me.
Yep. No, I agree. He's the perfect number 2 center to fit between Stamkos, and now they have a young kid in Braden Point who's on his entry level deal. So you're paying Stamkos 8.5. You're paying Johnson 5. Points, making less than $1 million on his entry level deal. So everything sort of fits. What's going to be a problem in a couple years, because Stamkos will be under contract and so will Johnson, is the Kucherov deal. And we talked about that last year. Yeah. Kucherov is going to make, now if he wants to stay in Tampa and take what Stamkos is getting, fine. He could make, based on the escalating prices, he could make 8 figures. He could make $10 million because he's a superstar. But not a lot of people know how much of a superstar he is. They didn't miss Stamkos in the last part of the year because Kucherov was going insane.
Right. No, that's the bottom line, and you're right. I mean, he's definitely going to make more than this contract, and a lot depends on what happens, with Stamkos coming back, and is he the kind of player that if he doesn't have the puck as much, is he as effective? Because Stamkos is going to take some time for sure. So I don't know. I mean, I think I like Kucherov. He's been very consistent. He's been very, very good. He was really good everywhere. He was really good at the World Cup of Hockey last year. Even he was just a good player. But I'm not convinced that he's a $10 million player yet. But like you say, he could be. He could be. I mean, especially if Stamkos were to get hurt again or something like that, and he would get a lot of time. It's just a matter of how much puck there is to go around. But I agree with most of what Yzerman's doing, as opposed to what's happened today, which I'm not a huge fan of. Today, the hiring of Rick Tocchet to the Arizona Coyotes on a 4-year deal. Mm-hmm. This is a big deal. And now Phil Kessel came out and said today, I'm sure you heard, that Tocchet was his favorite assistant coach of all time, and that does sum up a lot of my issues here. Honestly, that's something that, because there is something to that. I've heard about Tocchet being other people's favorite assistant coaches of all time as well. And remember, Tocchet had a head coaching job in the aforementioned Tampa, and didn't do much with it at all. It was pretty much a disaster.
Well, I mean, you have to take this into consideration. Tocchet took over for Barry Melrose, who was a disaster in his second job in the NHL, and benching Stamkos as a rookie, trying to teach him a hard lesson. And Tocchet was more like, okay, get along with the players, but and give Stamkos time, and that was a good thing. Right. But you had a team at that point with the declining LeCavier. I think, I'm not sure if Dan Boyle was still. I think Dan Boyle was still there.
He was still there for sure, but he was declining as well.
They had traded Brad Richards to Dallas. They still had Marty St. Louis at that point. Yeah. So it was the core group of that 2004 team was declining. He had some of the young players, but most of the young players now who are stars for John Cooper were playing in Norfolk in 2012 when they won a Calder Cup. So he didn't have those players. So I mean, do I think Tocchet? Well, I know that there's a lot of relief in Buffalo that Phil Housley was hired over Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, there was a ton of relief, and I agree with you totally. I thought Housley was a much better decision by the Sabres than Tocchet. And the fact that Botterill didn't go to Tocchet, of all the people who knew Tocchet, Botterill knew him well. In fact, he didn't go to Tocchet, and I think Tocchet wanted to be in Buffalo over being in Arizona. Yeah. Although, obviously Tocchet did play for the Coyotes, right? He was a Coyote for a while, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, and he was the assistant coach under Gretzky.
Right, of course, right. So, I think that listen, I hate to say all this stuff because Tocchet is a guy I actually consider an acquaintance and a really good guy and one of these guys who I deal with a lot. He's been involved in the Philadelphia media here when he wasn't coaching, and I'd eat dinner with him, and he's a solid guy, but he to me is the epitome of the friendly, player friend. Now this is though, to take it from another angle for a second, kind of thing on the top of my head. This is the Kevin Allen, Eric Tocchet, and I once had a show that we did on here on the Cranky Podcast show, the Cranky Writers show that we did, where we discussed the ebb and flow of coaches, and this is the perfect example of that because you go from a guy who was not a player-friendly coach in Tippett, but got a lot out of his players, to an extremely player-friendly coach. And that tends to be the ebb and flow. So you go from player friendly to not player friendly, and then the coach is too friendly with the players, and you bring in a Hitchcock or one like that, and you bring in that kind of guy. Which was the thing of Lindy Ruff to Hitchcock is what you saw in Dallas. Lindy Ruff's a little more player friendly than Hitch is, but Lindy's still a tough. He's not a player. This Tochet's a definite player friendly coach.
And that's something that I'm not sure works with a very, very young team. Now they did add Stepan, they did add Yarmulson. There's some veterans there. Shane Doan is obviously not coming back, but the core group, the group that's going to determine whether the Coyotes are successful or not over the next 3 or 4 years are Clayton Keller. Is Dylan Strome. Is the young the Christian Dvorak, the young group, and if they don't develop, then this team is going nowhere. And I don't know if, and this is maybe a little bit of an overstatement, but you don't want a head coach that will coddle to the young guys. You want somebody who will direct them. Maybe forcefully, maybe not so forcefully, but you want somebody that can do that. Now, they'll have respect for Tocchet because he's a former NHLer and was a really good player. Oh, yeah. I just don't know whether he's the right type of coach for that young group. That was John Chaika's decision, and we'll see how it pans out over the next few years.
Yeah, the guy I liked, I'm trying to remember his name. It's like totally leading me. Oh, it was Ralph Kruger. Sorry, yeah. So, and I don't even know if he interviewed for this job or not, but he's the coach that I think is sitting out there. We talked yesterday about, is Lindy Ruff the guy? And you had a guy, I forget who you had yesterday, who was the coach that would be.
Oh, I'm trying
to get a good guy yesterday. To me, Ralph Kruger's the guy. Like he is.
Oh no, Tippett is sort of the coach. Right. Tippett is sort of the coach in waiting, and so in a sense is Willie Desjardins.
Yeah,
and I know he's coaching the Team Canada, the 2018 Olympic team. So, he's going to be busy with that this year. But Tippett is sort of, the coach in waiting for whoever decides they're going to fire their coach in the first 25 to 30 games of the season.
Yeah, I would go to Ralph Kruger, to be honest. Kruger had a brief stint in Edmonton as a coach, but at a time when nothing really, nothing good was coming out of Edmonton.
And there was talk about Kruger being in the mix for, I think it was the Buffalo job, but he's working for an English Premier League team.
Yeah, he's a president of that team or something like that.
Yeah, and the question was, and I would have to assume that since his name didn't get forward in the process, that he is tied up with that job, that he wouldn't be interested in the head coaching job. Maybe that's not the case, but his name was mentioned as a possibility, and then it sort of dissipated, and we never heard of it again.
Yeah, this would be something that a big NHL franchise like a Chicago or something like that would have to pull off. Like they would have to go and they would have to, they'd have to talk to the English Premier team. They have to figure out a way to get him out of his contract.
Right.
It would be a complicated thing, but you can see a team like a Chicago or the Rangers or something like that, going that route if they needed to. It's just because he's a guy who was so impressive last year. I loved covering him in the World Cup when he was with Team Europe.
Yeah.
And just the guy definitely knows his stuff. Definitely works well with great young players. Which is,
I'm not saying it's very possible, but. Like we said yesterday with the Rangers, if the Rangers are going to fire Alain Vigneault, which is I'm just spitballing here, They've got a head coach on their roster in their staff right now. I would be shocked if they fired Alain Vigneault at any time during this year, and that Lindy Ruff wouldn't be the coach.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one.
Even if it's interim, even if you just for the end of the year, and then you want to reevaluate. But Rangers, I don't know about if it's Chicago. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on Joel Quenneville. How many Stanley Cups has he won?
Yeah, you're only as good as your last playoff series.
Sure.
This is the NHL after all. So I agree with you. I mean, Philadelphia is another one I think that could have a coach still. I think the Islanders could. I mean, I know they have a coach now, but I think the Islanders could be a team that moves into. There's teams that that are general powerhouses that are sort of struggling right now. Are the teams you have to look at for this kind of situation. All right, so my blog today is getting a lot of attention. I actually went on the radio in Colorado. There's a bunch of things. So my blog today is why NHL sources wonder why Sakic has done nothing for the worst team in hockey, and this is a legitimate thing. Like, to me, and I tried digging as deep as I could. I hate to get psychological on this completely, but there's almost an element to that with this one. It feels like, and I talk to people about Sakic, who really compares himself and likes to compare his style to that of Yzerman's, and that this is a big. And you remember that what's funny about that to me is I think of Sakic and Yzerman as I remember having debates with people about it, like who's better, Sakic or Yzerman. And then of course these two had the Colorado, the famous Colorado Detroit battle.
Right.
And here Yzerman is, signing Johnson, trading Drouin. Yzerman's been incredibly aggressive when you think about it. Over the last year, he came out when he first took over. Though he was not aggressive for a long time. There were people wondering when he was going to do anything. Now, he's kind of got his feet under him, and now he's done nothing but make what I think are pretty solid moves for his team.
Yes,
I think moving Duran was a brilliant move, honestly. Getting what they got for him, that could turn out to be a ton of their top two defensemen.
Well, but here especially for a player who I don't think. After the whole scenario that played out a couple years ago with Duran walking away from their AHL team and raising a hissy fit and not being a favorite of John Cooper, to get Sergachev, who's probably going to be within 2 or 3 years one of your top two defensemen, is I think he took Mark Bergevin to the cleaners. I'm not saying that Drouin is not going to be a good player. He's a very good player. He's a very talented player. But defense in this league right now is such a commodity that if you get a guy who's going to be, I'm not saying a superstar, but if you get a guy who's going to be a 25-minute-a-night defenseman, and that's worth its weight in gold.
All I have to say is Larson for Hall, right? I mean, you go back and forth. It's just like there's, that was maybe the extreme of it, but defensemen have more value. If you can prove they're a top four, they have more value than top six forwards. I think that's the bottom line. And I think
that deal. I mean, we're not going to go into that, but that deal.
But the only reason it can be justified at all is because of this, because it's
right.
People sitting there and saying this thing. It just. So when you look at the whole thing, you have all they've done is went out and got Nail Yakupov, who was really, it's like a shot in the dark. I think it's great. I think it would be great. I thought teams, I was kind of hoping Philadelphia would take a shot at Yakupov. I think Yakupov has talent and can do all these things. But the bottom line is, here's a guy who was scratched like crazy last year when he was in St. Louis, and this is all you did.
And they acquired Colin Wilson in a trade, but that was mostly a salary dump.
Yeah, that was mostly a salary dump. And Colin Wilson has proven to be as much as I like Colin Wilson in the playoffs, he's proven to be not much of a regular season performer at all. And Nashville's been trying to trade him for like 3 years. So it's like to Colin Wilson, that trade was something that the Predators were very eager to do, which makes you wonder. And you sit back now, and they've got, like you said yesterday, 39 contracts. They have had multiple chances to make changes. And I brought up some sources, and I'll bring up some quotes that I got here. And this is one of the teams that was on that claimed that they were talking, that they felt like they even matched out the Avalanche's crazy asking price for Duchene. They went in and they said, okay, here's they toiled over it. They came back to Zach and they're like, okay, we're going to do this. This is crazy, but we really want to get Matt Duchene in. And To which Sakic said no thanks, and which really that nothing will piss a general manager off more than giving him an asking price and then them meeting the asking price and then them coming back and saying no thanks to their own asking price. And but this team was wanted Sakic enough that they came back and said, okay, well, what else do you want to put in? What else do we need to do? Like what else do we need to do? And they got no response at all. So, and to the point where he said, I've never seen anything like it. It was incredibly frustrating. So this is and I bring this up because this, that is something that they could have done. They could have actually picked up some defensemen in that trade. They could have made because right now they're looking at 3 NHL defensemen on their roster.
Well, okay. First on Duchesne, the thing is the way Sakic is acting. He's acting like he's extremely, extremely gun shy after the deal that he made to trade Ryan O'Reilly. And now Grigorenko is gone to the KHL. Zadorov is an RFA, and he's threatening to go to the KHL. They got a couple other prospects, but that deal for a guy who's making $7 million a year and is a very good center, somebody who played on the Team Canada in the World Cup of Hockey, he got taken to the cleaners. He's not anywhere close to being Steve Yzerman in terms of his acumen as a general manager. So this is like, I can't get this wrong. I've got to get everything that I possibly can. But you can't make a deal that way. Deals are risks. And
they're pure risks. You have to find a player that you like, the other team doesn't like as much, and you've got to go on that. That's what you have to do. I've heard this stuff. Brian Burke described it before. He said, you have to make the other team think that they're getting one over on you.
Right.
So you find a player that they don't like for whatever reason. He's gotten in the doghouse with the coach or whatever, and you find that player and you bring him in,
right?
Because you really feel like at the end of the day, when he's on your team with a new fresh start, you're going to have a better player.
Yeah. So if you're talking to Columbus, first of all, and I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying that this is a rumor, but if you're talking to Columbus, and you're Jarmo Kekalainen, you're not giving up Werenski, you're not giving up Seth Jones. You are willing to give up Ryan Murray. If you're Sakic, of course you're going to ask for Werenski, you're going to ask for Seth Jones, but you're getting a former number 2 overall pick who hasn't developed his game because of injury, but he's not a bad player, and he could thrive in a situation in Colorado where he'd be a top pairing guy. You have to get obviously more than that. So that could be the start of a deal. But if you're not going to do that, then just say we're not trading him now. Now I'm sure Matt Duchene and Pat Brisson will lose their because they want out of there.
Yeah, because they've talked to every team in the league about him. So it's like, at this point, and Duchene is such a good person. This is the problem. Duchene is not the kind of guy who's going to cause a problem with this for sure. But players I talk to tell me that it's become a distraction no matter how good Duchene is about it. It has nothing to do with because Duchene and all the players are being asked about it all the time. That's when they can't stop the media. Even Duchene can say, I'm not going to talk about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he says he's not going to talk about it. People are still going to ask him about it. They're going to go at him. And to me, what everybody the theory seems to be that there is no ownership there that is pushing this. And Sakic is sort of, now with, Yzerman, for example, has Jeff Vinik above him. And Vinik is an aggressive guy. And some of the deals, like, say the Duran trade doesn't go well for Yzerman. Yzerman can turn around and say, well, Vinik really wanted me to move Duran out. And he can say that. And that is, it could be, some people might consider that lame, but I've had so many GMs say that to me over the years. I didn't want to make that trade, but the owner said I had to. The owner said I had to make that. The owner said I had to sign that guy. I can talk up, Ilya Bryzgalov in Philly was an example of that. So, there's certain situations. So you look at it, and I don't know if Sakic feels like because there's an absentee owner there that he can't. He's even more gun shy because he can't say that. He can't sit there and say that that the owner wants me to trade Duchene no matter what. And Duchene, on the other hand, can't go to the owner and talk to him, which is what a player like this would normally do. A player like this would normally go, and when he got to this frustration point, he would sit down with the owner and say, "Listen, either it's me or like the general manager at this point. That's what Duchene would say."
you've got two things at play here right now. We know that Duchesne had a really bad last quarter of the year last year, and teams will use that as leverage to give up less. We understand that. But there is a pressure point when it comes to Colorado. He's got 2 years left in his current contract. He's a UFA. Obviously, if it plays out to the end of that deal, he's not re-signing in Colorado. It's not happening. He's gone.
Right.
But the closer you get to the end of that contract, the less you're going to get in terms of value coming back.
Yeah, completely.
I think that
and if you play him this year, under this distractions, who's to say he's not to have another terrible year? You're going to get even less for him still. Like that. That's me. The other issue, right? So
this year's trade deadline is where they cross the Rubicon here. So basically, it's like if they pass the deadline, and you haven't traded him, then you got a guy with 1 year left on his contract who clearly doesn't want to be there. So the team that's trading for him isn't getting value in terms of the length of the contract or cost certainty. They're getting a guy who's probably, no matter where he's going to go, is probably going to go free agent because he wants the opportunity to test the market. So right now, I think they have to deal this guy before training camp, get the best return that they can get for him, and move forward. But that's not the only problem. I read your article. It's like you said, they've got 3 defensemen under contract, actually 4 if you consider David Warsofsky, who's played in the NHL.
Yeah.
He could be a bottom pairing guy. Zadorov is an NHL defenseman, but you're talking 5 defensemen. Every team carries 8. At least. So right now it's like he's got to go out and sign 3 defensemen. He's got the cap room. He's got the room under the contract limit. There are teams out there like Toronto who've got an excess of bottom pairing type of defensemen, and that might be a quote.
But how is any of that making you any better? Like at the end of the day, like what you're talking about now, or what we're talking about is really just kind of filling out your roster with from other teams, and that's.
Right. But last year, like if you looked at their defense, what do you think the bottom half of their defense was? It was Fedor Tutin, it was Patrick Wirkosh, it was Eric Jelena, it was the disposed from other NHL teams. So what is going to change? They're going to get Martin Marincin and Cody Franzen and whatever. It's going to be the same thing. That's the way that team is operating right now, because right now they're a rudderless ship. That's what they are.
And it's a shame. I mean, you have some serious talent there on the forwards level that is completely. That's the other thing that's laying this not having an owner. At some point, Nathan MacKinnon has to step up and say something like that. To me, it feels like he's the guy that has to. If this was Pittsburgh, Crosby would have said something by now, and maybe not publicly, but at least behind the scenes, you would have heard about it. Well, and Nathan MacKinnon has said nothing about any of this.
Well, the problem with Nathan MacKinnon is he really has. He has the leverage of being their go-to player, their star player, but he has no leverage in terms of his contractual situation because he's signed for 6 more years at $6.3 million. It's the same thing with Landeskog. He's locked up for 4 more years, and Eric Johnson is locked up for 6 years. So, the guys who are the core group, they're all locked up. The only guy who's got any kind of leverage is Duchesne because of his current situation. And all he can do is raise a fit because of where he is right now, where the team is right now. But if nobody's listening, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, no one is, and I don't think anyone is listening. I don't think anyone will listen unless MacKinnon comes out and says something. That's my issue. Like I think he's the guy who perhaps the owner would listen to, or perhaps the local media would get on Sakic, and perhaps you'd hear something on the radio. But really, it's amazing how. Talking to people out there, it's pretty much just being ignored, and it makes you wonder. I mean, the thing about Colorado that's it was a great hockey town for a long time, but before it wasn't a great hockey town, it was a really bad hockey town. And
this is the thing that's sort of, and we still don't have the full story, and we may never get the full story, but it's confused regarding the whole Kyle Dubas situation from a month or so ago because. The Leafs gave Dubas permission, or gave Colorado permission to talk to Dubas, but they thought it was, in regards to analytics and not to offer him the general manager's job, which, according to some reports, that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay, great, but does that mean Sakic was going to get booted up to team president, or was he
That's what I heard. That's what I heard was happening, and that I had mentioned it on the air, like that I kept hearing that Sakic was gonna move up and step out of that job, and now if that's the case, Sakic just doesn't want to be the guy who makes this trade and knows that they're going to bring a general manager in eventually. But if that's the case, then when is this general manager going to be hired, and who the hell could it be? That's the question.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you didn't now, the draft is passed, so you're free to hire a general manager if you want. But would you want to be the general manager who takes over there in that situation with, as you said, absentee ownership and a team that is just a morass, a mess, dysfunctional? How many other ways can you describe it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the job.
No, I mean, there are definitely general managers out there who would take it, but and some of them would say, they would look at the positives. I know, some of them would say, okay, well, the positives are we have a couple star players, we have, and a new general manager could come in there and sit down with Duchesne and Landeskog and say, listen, you guys are good players, let's make this work here. That could happen, and that's the only way you get through to a person like Duchesne at this point and get him, and we do convince him to stay. It's not going to happen. But you're right. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in. An absentee owner is a curse and a blessing, and I think that it only works well if you're willing to hold yourself accountable and take chances like you need to take, which is not what's happening with Sakic. He's really just floating along, expecting the situation to work itself out somehow, and it's not. It's and he's now past the point. Like I think you're saying, Duchesne, like the Rubicon is the trade deadline. I think it's now. I really do. I think it's flat out now. And if they make it to the trade deadline, I think they're gonna get pennies on the dollar for what they want. So I think they have offers right now. They have a chance to make something happen.
Right.
If they just let this go, then it's not going to get better.
The only reason I said the deadline is because at least the team trading for him gets a playoff and another year. Where obviously, I think a team, say like the Islanders, like Columbus, like Boston, who are mentioned in your blog, they want Duchesne. They want him for 2 full years. They want that additional scoring to take another shot at or have a better chance at winning a Stanley Cup. But I think they would take him with a playoff in another year. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that the price would go down, but the deadline raises the price sometimes, and teams get desperate.
It does, and if you're having a good year, if Duchesne can get his act together and say, okay, I'm going to play really well because I want to get traded and I want to get then perhaps that happens. But the chances of that are kind of they don't feel great. It feels as if you're going to see more of the same from Colorado this year. You've got too much money tied up in the wrong places. You've got only $12 million to fill up a whole defensive core, so you really have to move Duchesne to get that money back. Or it might be or you move Tyson Barrie, who you're paying $5.5 million to, and if you can get 2 defensemen for the price of 1, or I'm saying if you get a young defenseman. I mean, Barrie's probably a commodity that there are a number of teams out there who are looking for defensemen would be interested in. He's a right-hand shot. He's good skating defenseman, but. I mean, if they need to alleviate their cap situation, then, you're not going to move Eric Johnson. You're probably, if you're moving Duchesne, you're not going to move Landeskog or McKinnon. You've got Rantanen on an entry-level deal right now. So, yeah, and the kid that they drafted this year is not going to be in the NHL for probably at least 2 years. And they got screwed by the ping pong balls this year for sure. And that's Makar is a good player. It's just he's gonna play. I think he's playing at Boston University. I may be wrong on that, but he's gonna play at least a year, maybe 2 in the NCAA, and that'll be good for him. But it's not going to be immediate help. He could be a very good defenseman in a couple years, but it's going to take time. And what they may be doing is they may be positioning themselves to tank again and get one of those top 2, Ramses Dahlin or Svechnikov in the 2018 draft. It's very possible they're doing, this is all a calculated maneuver to finish 30th. And if that's the case, then you want to trade Duchesne and you want to trade Barrie to bottom out. What you want to do, but that is in the way things have been set up since I mean, Toronto was the last team that could actually try to tank and really and feel safe about doing it, in my opinion, because the way the ping pong ball is set up now, you can't.
Right.
Your chances are just as good that you don't get him.
True.
Get that pick, so it's pointless. You know, to me, that's just you really can't even. I like the way it is set up now because I don't like the idea of teams tanking. So I think it is much better. Moving on to Evander Kane. This has been an ongoing situation. I've been trying to chase down for a long time. You know, I know the Sabres felt as if there was no way that they could keep Kane and make it work. That was the whole feeling, that they had tried everything they could and that they had to move on from Kane. Now I hear that Botterill's actually brought in a little bit of a different attitude, trying to at least say with maybe new blood, come in here and I can give him a new chance and he can feel refreshed because he's got a new coach. He's got all the stuff that he has to deal with. So it sounds like the Sabres are actually more inclined to try to keep him now than move him, and see if they can get it started again. For the moment, I think. Yeah. You know what I think, and like we were just talking about with Duchesne, Kane's different in the sense that he's entering the final year of his contract. You're more than likely going to get just as much now as you will at the deadline with him being an expiring contract, especially if he repeats what he did last year and scores close to 30 goals. So it's in that sense, Botterill can back off. We need to trade this guy and just milk him, get as good of a year as you possibly can out of him. And then at the deadline, maybe then you can get a bevy in return. I would be shocked beyond reason if they extend Evander Kane. I cannot fathom them doing that. But him staying at the beginning of the year, you know, there's a lot riding on the Sabres' success right now. I mean, new coach, new general manager, but I think Terry Pegula wants this team to perform a lot better than they have over the last few years. They raised ticket prices. People in Buffalo are not too happy about that. You know, there's questions about their goaltending. There's questions about Jack Eichel after last year, all that situation. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And, you know, keeping Evander Kane around and having him score goals will help a little bit. But if he, gets injured again or if he has some off-the-ice problem again, then all those problems come right back again. Right, for sure. The other rumor I'm working on that I haven't written about yet is Montreal involved with Tyler Myers talk. And, we talked about Tyler Myers yesterday in terms of the Maple Leafs, perhaps, when I was mentioning Markov and other possibilities, Trouba. I know that Montreal has tried very hard to get Trouba to want to go to Montreal. Apparently has not had the luck that they've looked for there. Mm-hmm. And some people are telling me they're starting to consider Tyler Myers as an option. The Montreal has to have some. Montreal's in a situation that Colorado's in. They have to do something as well. They really do. And whether or not this is the move or not, I don't know. But it's in Montreal. Well, I mean, Tyler Myers. I mean, he missed most of the year last year. He's making over $5 million. I mean, Winnipeg might be in a position after adding Kulikov that they just want to get rid of Tyler Myers' money on the cap and take a prospect or a draft pick back. Let somebody else assume the risk. Yep. I mean, I saw him in Buffalo. If he's anywhere close to being that player, then he's a good acquisition. It's all a question of what you have to give up for him and if you have the cap room. We know that Montreal is the cap room right now, but the question is his health. And, I think it was a hip problem that he had. If that comes back, then, Montreal can absorb that because he would go on long-term injury, but they really need a defenseman who can be there on the ice. And if there's no guarantees. If he is there on the ice, then it's a good addition. But I mean, I think he makes sense in a number of situations. In Toronto, like I said, in Montreal, there's a couple other teams that need defensemen. So, we'll see what happens, but Kevin Cheveldayoff isn't exactly usually the most risky of general managers and active of general managers. No, he isn't. But yet, it seems as if there are some signs. We've had Peter Roney's talk about it too. There are some signs that he's loosening up, and perhaps probably because the ownership is probably pushing him, which is what we were talking about before. That, and it's good when ownership pushes general managers at times because a general manager doesn't do anything. It's a lot easier to not be criticized when you don't do things. it's a lot. When you actually do something, you put yourself at risk to being criticized much more often. But often teams fail because general managers don't do something, and but it's harder to sort of pinpoint that on a GM.
Right.
You can say, oh, we had the players, and the players, also. But yeah, I honestly think that Cheveldaev is looking like he's going to do some more things. And it sounds like Winnipeg has to do something. Winnipeg is in a tough division, a tough spot.
Well, and one of the other things that has to be considered is that now Myers makes 5.5 this year and next year. Enstrom is in the last year of his deal. Nick Ehlers' entry-level deal expires at the end of this year, and based on what forwards are making, he's going to be asking for at least what Scheifele is making, which is 6.1, and maybe more. And so, by clearing Myers out, you maybe open up room to extend Ehlers and if they're going to extend Ehlers, they're going to extend him for 8 years. They'll try to get locked up for as long as possible. So it's all asset management and money management here.
No, they need to do that. I mean, Ehlers has been such kind of an underrated player for them, and for such a long time now.
Under the radar, definitely.
Yeah, under the radar, and but yet part of that team that's turning into a really fine young offensive team. With a lot of weapons, they do need defense as well, but they need left-handed shooting defensemen. That's their biggest issue. They're still tied up with, which is the crazy problem to have in the NHL. It seems like I can never think of another team that needed more left-handed shooting defensemen. I mean, look at the Rangers went out of their way to get a right-handed shooting defenseman in Shattenkirk. That's usually what's happening. But they're tied up with, and I guess the Leafs also want left-handed shooting defensemen, right?
No, the Leafs want a righty. They've got two, but I think Montreal wants a left-handed shooting defenseman. And I think Myers is a righty, so that
he's a righty, yeah. So that does play out of that.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that the defenseman that Montreal really needs is Andrei Markov, but they won't give Markov what he wants.
Yeah, as of now, I mean we'll see. Let's see how this plays out. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll definitely see how it plays out for sure. We have 85 days till the NHL season starts. By the way, the other thing that I was told, and this comes out of Yager's agent, who's come through the lines, that Yager is talking to multiple NHL teams and is not going to go to the KHL, despite rumors, that he would start to see, and despite what you might think of Yager actually. Maybe using the KHL as leverage. I don't think the KHL and Yager are friends. I don't think that this is an option for them.
No, I'd like to see Yager hook up with an NHL team. I think it's possible. I keep going back to Vegas because I think even though McPhee and him, that was the first time around, but Vegas could use star power, could use a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer on their roster. It's I mean, the first year is going to be a sideshow. It's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury and James Neal and not much else. So why not have Jaromir Jagr there to bring in some fans and maybe score a few goals? I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. By the way, Kovalchuk, 1-year contract with SKA. You tell me that, he's going to say this time next year he will be shopping his wares again in the NHL. And it'll probably have to be a 1-year contract because he's 35 at that point, and nobody's going to want to sign him to a multi-year deal.
Yep, we're going to be stuck with Kovalchuk rumors forever, which has been the case since we started this thing. But yep, that's for darn sure. Mark Recchi's been named an assistant coach, basically takes over Tocchet's spot with the Penguins.
And Pierre Turgeon got hired as an assistant in L.A.
Wow, I didn't know that one. Okay.
Yeah, under John Stevens. I think that's his first coaching job. Although for some reason I think that he coached in the Q, but I'm not. I can't. I'm not sure.
Right. Wow. So we are definitely seeing a lot of players jumping in the assistant coaching spots, which makes sense. And finally today, I was told, and then picking this up, I saw this was pretty funny on Reddit for hockey, that Vladimir Putin sent a present to Alexander Ovechkin, a wedding gift.
Was it Donald Trump's phone number?
Nope. But this is I'm trying to figure out what it is. Like, I was looking to see what the heck it was. It looks like I don't know.
Yeah, all I know is anybody who wants a good laugh, check out on Twitter the video of Alex Ovechkin at his wedding reception. He took off his shirt and he was singing some song with a couple guys, and it's pretty him doing it sort of like trying to do like a Radio City Rockettes.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was like a kicking like line dancing type of thing. It's pretty funny.
That is definitely something that I will not be looking for. But you should definitely, if you want to try to figure out what Ovechkin's present were, check out Reddit Hockey, because I cannot understand. It looks maybe some kind of pottery. I don't know. Probably something very expensive. But I have no idea.
Probably something he stole.
Anyway, we'll be back again tomorrow with some more news for you and more stuff as we go along. Mike, enjoy tomorrow again as you head back up to Toronto. I know you've been taking your journeys, spending a lot of time on the highway there.
Well, tomorrow will be the fifth drive in 6 days, and it'll be the last one for a little while. Yes.
There you go. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you then.